There is a common complaint about Arknights: the word count. It's unnecessarily verbose, and this also makes it hard to get into the game. First of all, no, you're just not dedicating enough time like others. And second, the word count is exactly what makes Arknights a written masterpiece. Arknights has an extensive lore and world, and almost every event has a complex cast of characters. All of this is an immense amount of information. Also, when looking at just at a single event. A wise man once said, "If an information is not communicated within a scene, it is not communicated at all." Seems obvious enough, but when you look at Arknights, almost every information has to be portrayed by the dialogue due to it being a visual novel. Exceptions exist, of course. And I gotta be honest, I have an obsession with how Arknights does that with its writing. When we speak about writing, everybody has their own impression of what that even is in the first place. A story, its flow, or its conversations are what most think about first. To me, the thing that glues me the most to writing are two things: effective writing and filters. The first of the two can also be called the Chekhov's gun principle, which basically says that every line matters, be it to uphold the natural flow of a conversation, or provide context to a region, city, character, or what effective writing really puts focus on. Multiple of those. And here is where the filter is coming in. These informations are rarely told to us by a narrator. It's mostly dialogue, and that one is being done by characters that have their own personalities. They are the filter, and their personality filters how they are giving informations. At this point, an example is really helpful, and I'm gonna take one of the characters who I think does this the best, Costa. And for that, we are gonna take a look at a part of his best dialogue from So Long Adele, the beginning even line by line, and my interpretation of it, to show how effective the writing is, while also staying extremely natural. Further down the line, I will be taking some examples from other events too, shown on the screen right now. Up front, what the following scene is supposed to tell us is that Costa has changed from his past, and that his current situation is giving him doubts and struggles. To do that, one could just let him say that, but that would demand a situation that allows him to do so in character. A difficult task, especially in a rather light-hearted event such as this one. So the scene takes a much smoother way. This scene in question is when Costa was visited by Keller in his cafe after he got Adele to deliver an old book of Keller back to her. Keller starts the conversation by telling that she received the book and is surprised that he kept it so long, while thanking him for that. This tells us why Keller came here, and that she didn't think Costa is someone who would treasure the book so much. The reason being that Costa was once very interested in volcanoes, as it was explained earlier in the event. Keller thanking him for the return is a natural reaction of the polite woman that she is. Costa reasonably proceeds to tell her how the book made it back to her through Adele, as she was looking for one of the museum's exhibits. Not knowing which relation she and Keller have, he hesitantly asks whether she is her employee. This hesitation can mean two things. Either Costa is unsure whether it was okay to give her the book, or if asking for the relation is an appropriate question at all. Keller, not even thinking about either of these scenarios, just answers that Adele is her student. Costa probably didn't expect such a simple response with his worries in mind, and simply repeats her statement as if to show that he just asked this question out of simple interest, which might also be the case. Going from there, he doesn't know how to continue the conversation with an old friend, showing how awkward he can be and potentially why he avoided Keller that time when he saw her in the museum. Keller then asks what he has been doing, and Costa continues her sentence with telling her about his job to gather the shopping street residents' signatures, a work he is quite miserable about. This is another interesting detail in the conversation. Why does Costa add that he is miserable? Is he frustrated about it in this very moment? Since he knows that many look at him in disdain due to this job, does he already take away that he feels miserable about it, thinking that Keller would have the same impression of his work? Or does he simply want to vent? I leave that up to imagination, since I honestly also don't know exactly. Keller reveals that her family also has a little clothing shop here, telling us more about her past and connection to Siesta. She states that this should mean that she would need to sign too, a natural reaction after she just heard what Costa is doing. Costa again asks hesitantly whether she has any objections to sign. Again, this is where one could infer a couple of things from the subtext. Costa might ask hesitantly because he didn't expect the conversation to go into this direction, or him being simply awkward again. Keller says she would be fine with the signature, since they don't really rely on that shop anymore, which also shows that, unlike Costa, she doesn't have all too much attachment to this shop. Especially not if it means she is able to help an old friend make his miserable work easier. Costa then thanks her for her smooth help. And both of them sink back into silence, not knowing how to continue a conversation that somehow drifted into work, although they would have other things to talk about as old friends. And at this point, I think my argument has come across sufficiently already. Every line in this dialogue is either part of the natural flow of the conversation, or is due to a characteristic of Costa or Keller that is being shown by their reactions and tone. The filter has been applied. In the further dialogue, they switch their topic to that of the past. Their experiences with Adele's parents, Costa's very different past self, and his old invention of soda coffee. And they do so mostly free from their awkward pauses and overly polite tone in the first part. So one might argue that this earlier part is entirely unnecessary. But not only does it add the reason for why Keller is even here, it also highlights the difference in their conversation style when they talk about the present in comparison to the past. This change is what So Long Adele is all about after all. The effective writing of this scene thus does multiple things at once. It characterizes both Costa and Keller further, and it adds to the overall theme of the event. What I didn't even mention is that this scene even propels the plot, due to Adele finding one of Dolly's lost items as a result of the conversation. And I know, there's neither the need to interpret that much into a few lines, nor would anyone do so while reading. Me neither. And that's what's so great about good writing. One rarely notices why it is good, if one doesn't look closer. The natural incorporation of all these elements in one coherent scene are what Arknights writing is about, and why it demands such a high amount of words. To me, there is even a general trend that most low word count events do not have great writing because they are missing these scenes. And again, you can make a scene about Costa telling how he feels and Adele randomly finding the item, but that wouldn't be too exciting and you would need to find a way to make them do that naturally. This additionally would use even more time. Putting this in the dialogue while talking about other things is effective writing. To be fair, this scene is a very good example of a very good scene, and not all in the vast amount of events do that. But most do. Just not necessarily to this extent. To take another example, who is real? The lengthy debates towards the end of the event are amazing. The rest of the event doesn't have much text though, and equally does little happen besides the events in Pushan that further build our characters, add to the themes, or in general do something all too interesting. The overall stories, characters, and philosophies within Arknights are amazing. It's how they are being told and explored though that make this game a writing masterpiece, using every single word. Once chapter 6 starts at least. Shortly coming back to Costa, since he kind of is why I wanted to make this video in the first place. Besides this one scene, all of his actions and conversations paint him as a deeply complex character. And Arknights doesn't need anything besides its text for that. His conversation with his grandpa, his reaction to him dying, his thoughts about his work, and how he portrays this to others all make him deeper and explain him effortlessly. We often use the term NPC chill for someone we think looks interesting and cool. I use it when I want more information and dialogues with them. Costa, Anduin, Anastasio, Juana and Avitus are all goats and would be first-hand picks for me to free, just to get more content of their great dialogues. Okay, now that my actual reason for making this video is mostly done, I want to mention a couple of other writing aspects that I enjoy. The first thing being the concept of framing. Framing describes the action of influencing how one perceives a certain matter by giving certain information in certain ways. This is used extensively in many events of Arknights in an abundance of applications. Mainly does it set the stage for discussions to follow, or it reinforces themes of a story. A good example are the songs in between dialogue of So Long Adele. Not a worry, not a sweat, for what's gone is gone, and the future will come. Or, my favorite place exists only in my sweet memories. I have nothing but my sweet memories. They clearly talk about the theme of change and the past, both important in the event, and so the songs set the stage further for what one is supposed to take from the characters. Another example of this is the beginning of Mass Travels. Aurela and Nuada have a brief exchange about Laterano and its faith, scraping at what positives and negatives they have. This already touches on the discussions that would shape the event regarding faith and Laterano's actions as a whole. One is not surprised once this all commences. This short talk already prepares the audience's mind on this discussion. In this way, framing guides the perception of not only an event's themes, it also sets the stage of what we can accept from the story. As it is normal for framing, it is rarely noticeable when one doesn't look for it. It happens much more subconscious and gets more apparent the more one looks at an event in retrospect. There is another way of how this can influence the perception of a story, although this might only be me and it is very detailed. At the end of the first stage of Mass's travels, Lemuel is shown to be walking around without the need for her wheelchair. A logical development, since she was already shown to partially not need it before. What makes this development even more believable are two things. Firstly, is it her first active day as a newly appointed cardinal, a position that would be more suited for her to not use a wheelchair anymore, given the opportunity. Secondly, does she joke with a delivery man about her breaking the wheelchair speed shooting record? The event is aware of us questioning why she doesn't need it anymore, and at least acknowledges that it happened before. Given the time difference, it is not too difficult to infer that she simply recovered and this partially led to her promotion. This frames the current scene as realistic. There is little room to doubt that this is a fabrication, as it would turn out later. This of course now aims at the appearance of the Shrine of Nursery out of nowhere. Without the introduction of another anomaly, Lemuel outside of a wheelchair, this would be a far more exceptional occurrence than it still is. The change of Lemuel makes one less doubtful about another, much bigger change. In this way, the framing is being used to hide a coming plot twist much better. This brings me to the next point. Subtext and resulting interpretation. As shown just now, interpretations of even small things can go far, and given how much actual plots and philosophies there are in this game, this only gets more extreme on that level. What facilitates this effectively is the amount of subtext. Arknights requires a lot of attention when thinking when reading, not only because of its complexity, but also due to it not telling everything. A lot is hidden in dialogues, or needs interpretation to fill gaps. One of the worst things a story can do, in my opinion, is to tell everything in the most obvious way possible. And that's exactly what Arknights doesn't do, most of the time. This might be best illustrated by the discussion between Anduin and the Pope as they argued about Laterano and the law. Not only was there an extensive amount of subtext on what the law really is, It also left many possibilities of interpretation of it, but it also already made its nature clear from Mandarin's reactions. As he left the place of the physical law, he stated that it links them. Not only does that mean that the law is the reason for the Sancta empathy, but that it is also able to enforce its guidances on a subconscious level and make Sancta fall. Doing all of this, it gets rather clear that neither the law, Andoin, nor the Pope are without a flaw, and so is almost no one in Arknights. Especially when it comes to violent conflicts and philosophies. The next great writing aspect is ever present: moral ambiguity. How does one judge a character based on portrait events that at times are even littered with biased viewpoints from the narrators? Hamilton never moved away from his moral high ground in the battles of Hillock, but his atrocities are out in the open. Salek, on the other hand, has a pure heart, but her actions led to tragedies. The moral implications of that are up to everyone on their own. Our world has little black or white, but many shades of grey, and Terra is no exception. Few people are truly good, and even Rhodes Island is shady at best. As much as we want to see them as heroes, as much as the game makes them out to be the good guys, there are many examples of dubious actions. Best seen is that at the many operators that are far from morally just that we recruit. These ever-present moral ambiguities throughout Terra even lead to many uncertainties at the end of events themselves. Will an arrogant Aegir be able to prevent a repeat of the profound silence on all of Terra with their methods? Will a pirate crew, scarred by their former misgivings, be able to lead a more righteous life under a new captain? Or will that one be tainted by his crew's desires? There is never a clear path ahead, only possibilities. And those are only made possible by the many characters that influence and guide each other throughout the world. Speaking of the many characters, their level of development, so how much they change through events, is another great storytelling aspect of Arknights. Characters rarely make big jumps in their personalities and convictions if the current stakes don't allow for it. Salek, for example, undergoes a big change from her naive personality through the catastrophic incident that Hillock was. The timescale of the events and Salek's interactions during those all justify this. This might seem like another rather obvious point, but there are enough stories that don't deliver this. To make this more apparent, I want to shortly compare a character to its more than cheap copy. On a storytelling level, Surta is what Levitain wants to be. She is basically Surta all over again. Memory inheritance and a loss of oneself. And that's fine. I don't mind Enfield using the same story and character again, if it wouldn't have been such a lazy copy. Regardless of the actual huge differences in dialogue writing quality of the story, there are other glaring shortcomings of Levitain in her development. Surta took years to arrive at her conclusion to let her hunt for the past rest. She did so while interacting with an abundance of people. During that time, Rhodes became a home for her as a natural matter. It's deliberate character development that is also hidden in the subtext of her stories. The key difference to Levitain is that Surta's timeline is much longer, with rather small events shaping her. Meanwhile, Levitain does a 180 degree in a matter of a couple of hours, which would mean that to arrive at the same character development as Surta, a much bigger event must have changed her. All of her issues, though, are being resolved after she realized that Surta's memories won't give her an answer. After which, they exactly do that by telling her that a home is what changed her. The administrator then tells her that Enfield can be a home for her. And Levitain simply responds, "Well, I was not thinking that in the beginning, but now that we looked at some memories, you're right. Thanks. Now my troubles are over and I join Enfield." The end. There are very little interactions of her with other characters during this time, and it's one single instance that saves her in a matter of a few sentences. Levitane shows no obvious signs of struggle anymore with what plagued her for years. Surta struggles much more, takes much longer, and ultimately changes through her own perseverance. Enfield even mentions itself that after this lengthy time, Surta accepted Rhodes as her home, while they make Levitane accept Enfield as hers on the spot, like it would be the same situation. Not to mention that they're making it out like Rhodes Island wouldn't exist anymore, who would be aware of Surta's past struggles and could help Levitane extensively. This is not supposed to be an Enfield rant, but this is one of many writing problems that it has, and it also doesn't mean that Arknights doesn't have its badly written characters. It does take more time and effort in building its characters though, most of the time, through many interactions, and also leaves most developments much more open. One has to look closer to see Surta's growth in the subtext of her lore. This growth is proportional to what she encountered at a given time. This temporal aspect to Surta is so important because her change is big and requires equally big reason. Since her encounters are small in size, her growth is also very steady and reasonable to understand. Levitane has not nearly enough reason to leave her struggles behind so suddenly, making her a rather cheap copy. One of the best things about Arknights is that all of the things I explained are totally not necessary for one to enjoy parts of the game, but they are by far not the only aspects that make Terra's world more interesting and expansive. And that's where the interpretations of what writing means to one matter, since there are many other aspects that this can entail. The visual design and its storytelling, the many philosophies within events, the possible perception of events from an in-game perspective, the role of gender in visual designs, and so much more. There's this much to Arknights and its myriad of details to help flesh out the world and its characters. But a story is only so impactful as the audience makes it out to be, either for themselves or for others. And this community has made an astonishing job at going far beyond into opinions and dives of what this game means for them. Much better than that, a community can hardly show what good writing can achieve and how much it can inspire. And it is exciting to see what else there will be in the future.